Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you back to our second session for today on the AI NHI revolutions that are engulfing our world. The State of the World Forum, just to provide very brief context, is focused on what we call the four fundamental truths of our time. We're all facing accelerating planetary ecological collapse. We're all experiencing deepening instability and turbulence at virtually every level of human affairs. We have just unleashed completely unregulated exponential artificial intelligence, and technologically advanced non-human intelligences are here on Earth. And our species needs to deal with these realities in a very focused and concerted way. Because if you look at these fundamental truths, what emerges is that we're dealing with four intelligences: human intelligence, nature intelligence, artificial intelligence, and cosmic intelligence. And how we understand these intelligences, how we synergize and, in our case, establish intelligible communication with them, is why the State of the World Forum has been convened. This morning, we looked at the first of the two truths: climate, ecological collapse, and instability in human affairs, the code red issues of our time. In this session, we want to look at the extraordinary reality of advanced non-human intelligences on Earth and the revolutionary developments in AI. And then tomorrow, we're going to be looking for both sessions on how we humans establish intelligible communication with these other intelligences, how we learn the language of consciousness. But first, AI and NHI. And to moderate our session, I want to introduce a good friend of mine for whom I have extreme respect and admiration, who I consider one of the great journalists of our time, Ross Coulthart. He's won many awards. He's easily the premier journalist covering the NHI issue. And so as both an acknowledgement of who Ross is in our world and the way he has courageously pushed the frontier through the art of journalism on the NHI issue, we thought it would be good to have him just moderate our session for today. So Ross, welcome. And I turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. And I don't deserve those kind plaudits, but thank you so much for those lovely words. They make my head swell. Well, hello, everybody. My job is to try to corral the wonderful speakers that we have today and to try and give you some kind of a sense of the significance of emerging evidence about a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet, and also the implications for the nexus of that with artificial intelligence. Let's just start from scratch. Obviously, officially, governments don't acknowledge that there is a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet, and officially the Pentagon, the US Department of War's position on NHI, is that there is no evidence of extraterrestrial engagement with this planet. But I think after you've heard today's panelists, you'll be entitled to be skeptical about such assertions by the Defense Department and by sections of the US government that frankly seem to want to put a lid on public consciousness and awareness. I'd like to start with two scientists who have creditably done extraordinary work in raising public consciousness and awareness of the implications of scientific research which points to a possible non-human explanation for the phenomena that they're seeing. Professor Avi Loeb and Dr. Beatriz Villarroel. Avi Loeb, of course, is a theoretical physicist, a professor of science at Harvard University of some huge reputation. He's the author of several books, and the most recent of which is Interstellar, The Search for Extraterrestrial Life and the Future in the Stars. Avi, of course, is also very prominent at the moment in speaking out about interstellar objects like Oumuamua and most recently the 3I Atlas. I'd love to bring Avi in because I'd like Avi to explain to our audience exactly why he believes the 3I Atlas object does display anomalous properties, which may in fact suggest that it's not just a comet, as many conventional astronomers and astrophysicists believe, but perhaps an object that is perhaps advanced technology. And if not 3I Atlas, maybe sometime soon there will be an event in our solar system which points towards the arrival of some non-human intelligence from elsewhere in our solar system or universe. Avi Loeb, welcome to this panel. Can we bring Avi in?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ross, for having me here. Let me start with what I believe makes science exciting. The foundation of science is the humility to learn, not the arrogance of expertise. And what you find very often among scientists within the mainstream is the arrogance of expertise. They rely on echo chambers that they produced that repeat mantras about past knowledge, and they are very resistant to the possibility that they might have missed something. So let me illustrate that with the example of unusual objects near Earth that might be of extraterrestrial technological origin. I'm currently leading the Galileo project, so let me just say a few words about that, and then I'll go to the subject of interstellar objects and 3I Atlas. I will do that within about 5 minutes, so it will be very brief, and if you have any questions, I'll be delighted to address them later. So let me share my screen just to show you some visuals. So first, the Galileo project has built 3 observatories, one in Massachusetts, another one in Pennsylvania, a third one in Nevada, that contain infrared, optical, radio, and audio sensors that look at the sky at all times in search for outliers, objects that do not look like human-made technological objects. And the latest observatory was on top of the Sphere in Las Vegas. I went there just this summer, and as you can see on the video on the left side, we had to climb all the way up to this structure of 130 meters. Be careful about our head not to bump it against the metal pipes there. And at the end, we put a network of infrared cameras on top of the sphere that monitors. It will monitor millions of objects in the sky over the coming year, and we will use machine learning software to figure out if any of them are outliers, not human-made. I should also mention another frontier that was opened over the past decade in astronomy, which is objects that arrive into the solar system from outside. These are interstellar objects, and we know that they are interstellar, that they do not belong to the solar system, because these objects are moving too fast to be bound by gravity to the sun. So we can flag them just by their speed. And the first one was spotted back in 2014. It was a meteor identified by US government satellites. And then telescopes found 3 others. The first in 2017 was named Oumuamua, discovered by a telescope in Hawaii. Oumuamua means a scout in the Hawaiian language. It did look unusual. It was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force. And it didn't have any cometary gas or dust around it. So the question was, what is pushing it? After that, there was a comet, just like regular comets that we see in the solar system. And then this year, on July 1st, 3I Atlas was discovered by a telescope called Atlas in Chile. And it also had different anomalies than Oumuamua, and I'll speak about them. Here are some images of 3I Atlas. It's a very large object, and it's quite bright. And it's sort of a gift from interstellar space because it moves in the plane of the planets around the sun to within 5 degrees. You can see it at the bottom of this slide. You can see the trajectory of 3A Atlas. If you look at it from the side, it looks like it's perfectly aligned with the plane of the planets around the sun. And it comes close to Mars. It came close to Mars, and then Venus, and eventually Jupiter, with a very small probability of doing so. The chance of it being in that plane is 1 in 500 to within 5 degrees. And also there are some other anomalies. For example, it has always displayed an anti-tail. I mean, comets have tails that extend away from the sun because the gas and dust are being pushed by the solar radiation pressure and the solar wind away from the sun. This object showed an anti-tail, a jet which is pointed at the sun. And we still see it after it passed closest to the sun on October 29th. There is a new Hubble Space Telescope image from a couple of weeks ago that also shows an extension in the sun-facing direction of the glow around this object. We also see some plume of gas around it that was found by the Webb telescope, and the Keck telescope discovered that it contains much more nickel than, and they don't see evidence for iron. And that's very unusual because usually nickel and iron come together in all astrophysical environments. They are produced together. The only place where you find a lot of nickel with very little iron is in industrial production of nickel alloys. And so the question is whether the surface of this object was technologically produced. And these are more recent images that were obtained by amateur astronomers after perihelion, closest approach to the sun. And they show multiple jets. In fact, the most recent images show just an anti-tail as of this week. And the object will come closest to Earth on the 19th of December, within a few days from now. And so altogether, I don't have time to go into it, but there are 13 anomalies that I identified with very small probabilities for each of them. And they involve fine-tuning of the orbit. The arrival to Jupiter, for example, is at a very specific distance, which happens to be the distance where Jupiter's gravity dominates over the sun's gravity. And that is amazing that it arrives exactly at that distance to Jupiter. There are all kinds of other anomalies, and altogether back in July, I decided to define a new classification scale. It's now, there are several papers on it. It's called the Loeb scale. And the idea is that a level of 0 with respect to interstellar objects would mean that they are of natural origin, like a comet or an asteroid, an icy rock, basically. And the level of 10 would imply that they are alien technology objects that could be a potential threat to humanity. And my point is simple. Even if you assign a small probability for a technological object, the implications for humanity would be huge if it happens to be technological. So therefore, we must take this possibility seriously. This is called the black swan event in the nomenclature of the intelligence agencies. Um, back on September 11th or October 7th, these were events that the intelligence agencies assigned a very small probability of actually materializing. And we all know the consequences. Lots of people died. So the intelligence agencies learn a lesson. They cannot dismiss small probability event because they might have high impact on society. And so this is the approach that we should take when we have a visitor to our backyard. We cannot just ignore it. We have to consider seriously the possibility that it's technological because the implications to Earth would be large. And that's something that scientists are not familiar with. Just this week, there were two experiments reported in Nature magazine where a particle, a ghost particle, a sterile neutrino, that was suggested in recent years to exist based on anomalies in some data. It was ruled out by these experiments. So about $90 million were invested, and turns out that it's not there. But even if it was there, the implications to society would have been minimal. And the fact that it's not there makes it completely irrelevant. So in such a case, which is very often the case in science, the implications to humanity are small. Whether a particle exists or not, who cares? This particle is very weakly interacting. However, if we do have a technological object near Earth, we all need to know about it. And therefore, we must take this possibility. It should be part of the discussion in the mainstream of science. That is my main argument.
So, Professor Avi Loeb, thank you for that summary. Do you say that you believe it is more likely than not that the object is anomalous? What's your position in terms of the likelihood? I take your point about the extraordinary percentages in relation to it being a natural object. It looks very unlikely that it is a natural object based on the anomalies that you've described. Where do you stand? If you were to summarize, do you think it's more likely to be anomalous?
No, back in July, when I suggested this scale, I gave it a rank of 4. Okay, so I said it's most likely natural, but there are significant anomalies. And the most recent jets that we observe, could basically tell us whether it's natural or artificial, because the speed of the gas in those jets would be less than hundreds of meters per second if they are produced by pockets of ice that is sublimated by the illumination of sunlight. However, if it's technological thrusters producing these jets, we should see speeds that are 1 to 2 orders of magnitude larger in chemical propulsion or ion thrusters or even better technologies than those. So I think in the coming weeks, we'll have much more data collected on the object when it comes closest to Earth. And as soon as I see that data, I can give you my conclusion and as to whether I rank it closer to 0 or closer to 10. That's the beauty of science. It's like the work of a detective. We don't, there was a NASA press conference where the arrogance of expertise was on display, where scientists already know that it must be a comet because there is some dust or gas around the object. But guess what? A spacecraft could collect ice from a dense interstellar environment and can collect also dust. And you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Just from the fact that the skin sheds some gas and dust doesn't mean that it's a natural object. And of course, all objects respond to gravity, so that by itself cannot tell you what the nature of the object is.
One thing I do want to ask you, Professor, I've seen a lot of publicity about access that you've sought to telescope data, particularly some of the defense data. Have you been frustrated in your efforts to get some data from the US government? Do you believe that the United States knows a lot more about these objects, such as 3I Atlas, than it's letting on?
Well, first I should praise Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who was very attentive to my ask for data release and transparency. And she wrote 2 letters to NASA encouraging them to share data and also use their space assets in looking at 3I Atlas. This is the way to make progress. Just by collecting data, we will know if these anomalies indicate something unusual. And in the case of there were images taken by the high-rise camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter that was closest to 3I Atlas within 30 million kilometers. We will never have a camera as close as it was, but it happened a day after the government shut down in the US. And then we had to wait for 45 days before the data was released. There was a press conference by NASA in which the fuzzy images were shared. It was a very low quality data because there was some jitter in the camera. I found the entire saga of the delay in the release of the data quite unfortunate, because they should have just shared the data with scientists, irrespective whether the government is being shut down. They should have not had a press conference where the images are so disappointing and fuzzy. And in fact, amateur astronomers were able to get much more information with instruments that cost thousands of dollars instead of $1 billion. So my criticism of NASA is that it's a very bureaucratic body that does not put science as the highest priority. It has politics, it has bureaucracy. It's just not the kind of image you want NASA to have. I don't believe in them sabotaging on purpose scientific data. I just think that they are too bureaucratic to respond in real time to the priorities of science.
Now, I'm going to come back to 3I Atlas shortly, Professor, because I want Birdie Jaworski to talk to us about what she sees with her remote viewing. But before you go, I want to ask you a totally unreasonable question. You're an eminent astrophysicist. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you. You've obviously seen a lot of the evidence, a lot of the discussions about what the United States knows about the possibility of non-human intelligence. You've looked at a lot of the evidence that's been collected over the years, certain data, the tic-tac, the gimbal, the go-fast videos. Do you have a view on whether there is already a non-human intelligence engaging with planet Earth?
I think the information we have publicly is intriguing. And I think it should become a part of the mainstream in science to figure out if there is anything behind it. So we don't have a smoking gun that would convince everyone at the moment. If there is such information that is classified, it should be released, because if some information was collected 50 years ago, it's completely irrelevant because the technology for national security, because the technologies used by adversarial nations 50 years ago are not relevant to today's battlefield. And so my hope is that any such information that is quite old will be shared with scientists like myself, because our day job is to figure out what lies outside the solar system. If there is a superhuman intelligence, we should all know about it, because we are, all humans are in the same boat here on Earth. And, if we have neighbors, suppose you knew that you have neighbors and you sit at the dinner table with your family members, you will not hide it from them. It makes no sense, because those neighbors might show up at the front door. They might have an impact on your family members. Why would you hide it? And so if government has such information, they should share it. If they don't, they should say explicitly what these unusual objects that they keep discussing are, and just clear the table, so that we can move forward. But it's not the reality right now, and I really regret that.
Professor Loeb, thank you so much for giving us that potted summary, and you were excellent in your discipline and constraining yourself within a time schedule. So thank you. I'm going to go now to Dr. Beatriz Villarroel, who has done some extraordinary work, which has recently been peer review published in a very eminent scientific journal, which looks at the very real possibility that there is some form of highly advanced technology in geostationary orbits. That's about 45,000 kilometers from Earth. Beatriz Villarroel, can you explain, and I know this is horrendously complicated, but can you please explain how you did your experiment using old astronomical plates to peer into a pristine pre-spaceflight sky? What did you discover?
So I'm going to go without any slides myself and try to do it just spontaneously. So today, when you look at the sky, and even if you look with a naked eye, or even more so if you have, of course, a better telescope, what happens is that you're going to see like thousands and thousands of brief flashes of light lasting maybe just half a second over the sky. And these flashes appear because sometimes we have sunlight reflection on something that is extremely flat and extremely reflective, so-called like mirror-like reflectivity on artificial object. Let's say we have space trash, we have lots of satellites in the sky, and like most of these flashes come from from these sunlight reflections on artificial objects at geosynchronous orbits at those high altitudes, like we talk about 42,000 kilometers. So that's what we see today. The interesting thing here is that, so I was working with a different question. I was interested in searching for vanishing stars, and for that we were using, and still are using, images from the early 1950s, before the first human satellite was launched. So we have been crunching all these old photographic plates, which is like the old technology one used in order to image the sky. You have these glass plates, you have a photographic emulsion on top of it, and you have your telescope. And these glass plates today have been, many of them have been digitized so that scientists can be studying the sky as it looked in the early 1950s before the first human satellite. So as we digitize them, we can see all these objects and we can compare with the sky as it looks today. And surprisingly, we did find lots of these light flashes that look similar to what you see on the sky today, except for that we're talking about a pre-Sputnik sky. So you can see, for example, like we have a beautiful image of a triple transient that appears and vanishes within one plate exposure. We have other examples. Sometimes they're even aligned along a line. And this, of course, opened up the discussion, like, so what can it be? Because there's no astrophysical explanation to this kind of transience, because whatever it is, it's, if real, you can only explain that by something very close to the Earth, because you have multiples of them and they're kind of synchronous. I mean, it happens in a very short time frame. And also, only artificial objects are going to give you these kind of flashes, because if you have some asteroid or something like that, you're going to get streaks, not these flashes, which are very that are analog with something very artificial. So since we can't explain that with any astrophysical explanation, then people have been trying to say, oh, it's probably plate defects. It has to be plate defects that just happen to look like stars. Maybe you're looking at the edge of the plates. Well, we also see them in like in the middle of the plates. And they try to say, oh, well, it has to be plate defects because like it's the most natural explanation, and all these old photographic plates had all these defects. And the fact is that we are finding hundreds of thousands of these transients. I don't think all of these hundreds of thousands of transients that we collect with automated methods are good. All of them are real, because we surely have some false positives there, especially really close to the edges of the plate, and because we haven't visually inspected each one of them. So there are going to be some of these that are not even point sources. However, what happens is that if you look at our sample of 107,000 of these flashes, transients as we call them, there's a serious deficit in the Earth's shadow. So as the Earth casts this shadow that is getting like a cone, I mean, it's like a cone is getting narrower and narrower further out. You can look inside the Earth's shadow and see if you have the same or the expected number of transients. And what we see is a huge deficit. And if it would be plate defects, of course, you wouldn't have that deficit, because plate defects, they don't know where is the Earth's shadow. They have no reason to systematically avoid the Earth's shadow. And then people try to say, oh, maybe it's some systematic effect because you have maybe more transients like close to the plate edges. Okay, so you just look inside the circle, like inside the center of the plate, and you still see the same deficit. And not only that, we do find a correlation in time with nuclear bomb tests and with UFO sightings. And like there's an increase in the number of transients right after a nuke goes off. And if you have UFOs happening at the same time or UFO sightings, you have even more transients. And I I find this really hard to explain in any natural term. And I'm positive that this cannot be this kind of defects. So I think these transients are really important to study because there are so many of them. And what it tells me is that for 100 years, astronomers have been looking at the plates. They have been seeing all these little star-like things that they have been dismissing, like plate defects, because they can't find it on a follow-up plate. And they just say, oh, it's garbage. And maybe there's lots of data there that just has been ignored and that are actually the real proof of that we have company.
So,
Yes.
Beatriz, can you explain to my audience? We're talking here about technological objects. When you say artificial, specular, reflective objects, out at 42, 43, 44, 45,000 kilometers from Earth, geostationary orbit, there are literally, from reading your paper, thousands of these technological objects that were there before humans first went into space.
Yes, I estimate that we are dealing with something between tens of thousands to some hundred thousands of objects in reality, because we have two errors happening here. First, one object might produce multiple transients, but second, we are probably missing a lot of these transients as well. So that's where my estimate is.
So are we talking about perhaps a technological signature from a prior civilization on this planet? What are we
It
talking
could
about here?
be. I mean, it could be anything. I can only say it's not ours because I don't think humans had the capacity to send so many objects at those altitudes in the early 1950s. So
And
if it's not ours, it can be anything.
the thing that took my breath away was I was really surprised and excited for you to see your paper passed peer review. So your colleagues, your scientific peers, have not been able to lay a glove on the analysis that you've made. I know they try to suggest that it was plate defects, i.e., some kind of perhaps a scratch or a tear on the astronomical plates, the photographic plates, but you've disproved that by showing what happens when the shadow of the sun has its effect. Is there any plausible explanation that is not anomalous to explain these objects, to your
No,
knowledge?
not what I know of. But of course, nature can always surprise. Maybe there's some kind of phenomenon that we haven't even thought up that could explain these things that we can't imagine it right now, but when we've been working with these kind of things for a couple of years, maybe some other astronomer will discover and say, hey, this is actually something natural that happens or that is forming in Earth orbit and nobody ever knew. Everything is possible. But with what I know today, with all the phenomena I'm aware of and that I've been rotating with other astronomers over the last 5 years, there's nothing else.
So there we have it. We've got two very highly respected scientists who have presented evidence which I think legitimately raises concerns about potential anomalies that suggest potentially a non-human intelligence. Beatrice, one of the groups, the bodies, the institutions that would be capable of resolving this mystery once and for all, of course, is the United States, because they have some of the best space-based cameras. Some of them are defense satellites. Has there been any interest from the US Defense Department to look at or help you, assist you in making your investigations? Have you made any inquiries with the United States about using some of their more advanced space-based observation platforms?
I wouldn't even know how to go about that to do so.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because they must know what you're talking about.
I bet they do. And actually, I can say somebody approached me, someone who is read in, and told me that he gets the same numbers. I'm not going to give any details, but someone who I found highly credible approached me and said that my numbers, tens of thousands to 100,000s, are reasonable, that I'm not crazy. And he had reacted the same way when he had first learned about it. So let's see.
Okay, so there is the dilemma, ladies and gentlemen. We have two eminent scientists raising concerns, entirely scientifically legitimate concerns about perceived anomalies that suggest a potential technology. I'd like to bring in now a friend of mine and a technologist and futurist and also economist, Pippa Malmgren, who has a very good understanding of the debate about non-human intelligence. Pippa, if we could bring you in, I'm really interested in drawing your view on the broad issue of a non-human intelligence. To state the proposition, the official United States government position, of course, is there is no evidence of extraterrestrial engagement with this planet. That's a flat categorical denial by the US Department of Defense, Department of War. What's your position? What do you think?
So, hello, Ross, and I'm running a little bit late this evening. Sorry for being delayed. Well, first of all, let's be clear. We have had formal press conferences by the Air Force, the Pentagon, the White House, NASA, all confirming that UAPs are real. Now, they said it in a blink of the eye, and then they never talk about it again. But the point is, they have all confirmed. Under the Biden administration, we had that. So, in a sense, that's a major step, right? That is confirmation. Okay. And now we have this film, The Age of Disclosure, with many of the most senior intelligence and military officers the United States has, all confirming anomalous phenomena is real. There is something, we just don't know exactly what it is. So if we begin with that, then I think in a way, the easier thing is, instead of waiting for further confirmation, we just accept, okay, we have that confirmation now. This is the disclosure. And so now the question is, what is worthy of study? And then this is what's so interesting, that as we bring our most sophisticated science, our most sophisticated instrumentation, we have ever better tools in the form of, for example, the James Webb Telescope, which is effectively a prosthetic for the human race. It allows our eyes to see, what is it, 1.5 million miles away. We're starting to bring back samples from asteroids like Bennu and getting confirmation that the component parts of DNA are found in some abundance on asteroids. So, given all of that, the question is, why bother allowing those members of the scientific community that have doubts to decide the speed at which discovery happens? I kind of think, actually, for those people who say, well, I don't think so, great, you've self-selected out of the conversation. Goodbye. Okay. And then we're going to continue looking at these things. Yesterday when I appeared on this conference, I went into some detail. I won't do it again here, but humanity is punching into new realms, deep into not only space, which is the most extraordinary physics lab that humanity has ever had access to. And we are discovering that we're capable of things in space that we had not imagined before. For example, we've already had the first factory go up into space and return with a product, which was pharmaceuticals. And people are like, wait, why are we making pharmaceuticals or drugs in space? And the answer is because some ingredients will bind in zero gravity that will not bind in gravity. So the idea that we already fully understand how everything works, it cannot possibly be true as we enter these new realms that have very different characteristics than what we're accustomed to. The same counts in the other direction. If that's up, then there's also down, where we have, like the James Webb Telescope, we have the Titan Krios microscope, which is allowing us to see down to the atomic level. and the subatomic level and the nano level. And suddenly we're able to, think of it this way. We learned how to smash atoms together at the end of World War II in order to create nuclear weapons. Today, we are learning how to place atoms together to create new materials using quantum computer chips to problem solve at a speed that's never been known before. If we look at the Willow chip that Google has released, it's able to solve a problem in 5 minutes, literally, that previously was theoretically expected to take pretty much the known history of the universe to solve with all of the computational power that we have. So the idea that everything that can be known is known just simply doesn't add up any longer. And so we have to expect that now we're going to see the science community really split into those who say, let's bring our best science and our best instrumentation, our best artificial intelligence to understand what we are coming into contact with in these new realms. And then those who say, well, no, that's a waste of time. Okay, fine. Again, you've just self-selected out of the conversation. You go study something else, and that's fine. So, the question is, are we going to create a different intellectual environment? And here's where I would say maybe the biggest issue of all, and the issue that I think is the least understood, is, ever since René Descartes came along with the notion that you could split apart the scientific from the mysterious, that the idea was in the 17th century that you could literally take the body and the physicality of a human, and that could be given to science. And anything to do with the soul, the spirit, mythology, mysticism, that was for the church. Well, that Cartesian split, as we call it, I think technology is actually pushing the two back together again and allowing us to view reality in a much more holistic way. Interestingly, most of the world never had a Cartesian split. This is a very Western European American phenomena. The Russians did not have it. The Indians did not have it. The Chinese did not have it. So they do not have these hangups about studying phenomena that in the West we might say is mysterious, mythological, involving things that are not considered serious science. And they're like, yeah, it's all one thing. You can be a rational scientist and study something that has mystical qualities. So I think that's part of what's causing a race between the superpowers as to who announces what first.
That is a beautiful segue, Pippa, because I think that the dilemma, that Descartesian dilemma of how you include the woo, the mysterious, in physical science is really at the heart of all of this. I'd like to cross now to Jonathan Berte, who is himself a nuts and bolts engineer. He has a company called RoboVision in Belgium, which works in AI technology. But John's also a founding member of the Soul Foundation, which devotes itself to investigating the possibility of a non-human intelligence. John, how do we reconcile the woo with physical reality of science, scientific method?
Well, I think that for all the realm that we've been here as humans, that part that we didn't properly understand always was a mystery. So I don't think it's something new. I do think that I agree with Pippa that the spiritual realm could be technological in nature. And we've seen with the rapid rise of AI, and it has only started now, that a lot is possible. And we haven't seen, of course, the quantum AI yet. So I strongly believe that we're ahead. I mean, that we're heading towards a series of disruptions that will also can be considered as black swan events. So, yeah.
Can I ask you this, John? I mean, you've probably more than most. I know you've built an AI platform for the Sol Foundation, which is absolutely terrific in terms of sorting through and aggregating data. What conclusion have you reached as a scientist, as a nuts and bolts engineer scientist, about the reality of an NHI, a non-human intelligence, engaging with this planet? Do you think the evidence is there?
Well, we've two aspects of it, Ross, and it's a very good question. One aspect is informational, like all of these anecdotes, all of these snippets of information over the past 7 decades indicating to something pretty astonishing, but of course not accepted by consensus reality nor by our politicians. And on the other hand, there is observing reality, observing our skies. So the present sensors giving something. And of course, many of them are in the arms of the military, are in the hands of politicians or governments, and that makes it a little bit more difficult. Hence, it's really respectable that people as Avi Loeb come forward. And from a university point of view, I found such organizations such as the Galileo project. But what we've found with Sol is indications, informational pieces, for instance, in this largest trove of newspaper archives, newspaper.com, that, yeah, there are phenomena in our skies that have, coherent features, have been noticed by many trained observers over decades and decades, and that it's very hard to get confirmation from the government, although whether it's true or not. So
I think one of the most interesting distinctive points is the Pentagon will not answer the question whether there's evidence of NHI, a non-human intelligence, a much broader term engaging with this planet. They've specifically refused to substitute the term NHI for extraterrestrial to multiple journalists, including myself. Extraterrestrial, of course, is an intelligence from elsewhere in our solar system or in our universe. Do you think it's more likely, John, that the explanation for what we're talking about is perhaps something that is crypto-terrestrial? It's here on this planet with us, or interdimensional?
It's my personal belief that some of these realities where we see fractions of in our own reality are interdimensional in nature. And some of my friends like Eric and Hal also have stated stuff in that direction. So I think that they do a very smart move. I mean, from the Pentagon's point of view, in deviating the thorny subject. And you see similar stuff with Elon Musk, by the way, this wonderful choice of words to deflect from the core issue, because for the layman, it's of course ET and extraterrestrial intelligence. And I do think that some of these phenomena are, from my perspective, interdimensional, and hence can be tweaked in wording, not to be considered as extraterrestrial.
It really does raise the question whether a lot of the things that we've dismissed as spiritual belief systems, religious ideas, myths, fairy stories, legends, whether there's a reality there, the little people, the fae. Do you suspect that throughout history, a lot of what has been described in our folklore has some bearing in reality?
Well, I think that there is an unaccepted reality that the so-called experiencers have more sensor or more technology to experience and to perceive it, and that for 99% of mankind, seeing is believing. So if you don't see it, you don't believe it. I think there is a truth to that, and as we discover more and more mysteries of biology in our own DNA, I think that some of the perception could be ingrained in the DNA of such experiencers and be perceptible for other realms of reality.
So we shouldn't ignore the woo. We should basically consider it as data and see whether we can fit it into our accepted model. Let's now try some woo. I'm really interested to hear from Birdie Jaworski, who is a remote viewer of some renown. Birdie, you've done remote viewing analysis on 3I Atlas, the interstellar object that Professor Avi Loeb has taken a great interest in, and which he suggests may well indeed be anomalous. Can I ask you, Birdie, what have you found?
Yes, Ross. I'm really glad to be part of this conversation. And for those in the audience who aren't familiar with remote viewing, in 1995, the US government declassified a secret program called the Stargate program. And they admitted that they spent over 20 years and 20 million taxpayer dollars training military soldiers to be psychic spies. They worked with scientists from Stanford. They worked with known famous psychics. They also worked with a number of secret information that they had gotten from Russia's parapsychology program. And they were able to train literally any soldier to become a psychic spy. When it was declassified, I was one of the very first civilians trained in this. So I've been involved in remote viewing for 30 years. And it's not magic. Remote viewing is typically done blind. You don't know what it is that you're going to look at. And when I looked at 3I Atlas, I had no clue what I was being sent to engage with using only my mental powers. I did this session on July 31st of this year, and it came from a pool of operational targets. That's the military term for what you're going to look at in remote viewing. And I was only given a set of random, truly random numbers that were associated with this target, the target being 3I Atlas. And I spent roughly 5 hours on this session, and I posted 3 hours of it on my YouTube channel, and people can watch me work in real time there. But I first started describing space. I knew right away because space has a feeling to it. And I described this object in space, moving through space, moving into our solar system. And this particular object, I did get that this is a natural object. I did not get that this object itself, that 3I Atlas, I didn't get that it's a big spaceship hollowed out with a ton of aliens inside. I got a natural, though unusual, astronomical object. And that's how I described it as I moved through my session. But there were interesting and unusual properties with this object, its motion, its acceleration, some of the compounds that were in this object. And I described these in my session. But what was super interesting was I discovered that there was a piece of technology associated with this object, and it had been placed there billions of years ago by another civilization, almost like our Voyager probe that we sent out years ago, decades ago now. Now it's traveling the universe, and it has our categorization of humanity on it, mathematical symbols, the naked human body, music, all of the best of humanity, and how we tend to understand ourselves. And this civilization did something similar. They were way more advanced than we were, very, very non-human. And they placed something inside this object, knowing that it was on this long, deep journey going off into space. And I believe that this information has been picked up by other civilizations along the way. And so that's what I got with 3I Atlas. Now, this object inside there could be affecting the movement of 3I Atlas. I'm not really sure, not being an astronomer, but it was a fascinating look at something that's completely natural from billions of years ago, billions of miles away, moving along. And it's got a little hitchhiker on there, a little piece of technology that tells the story of this civilization that is now long gone. So that's what I got. Interesting.
That's fascinating.
Stuff.
I was expecting you to tell me, Birdie, that it was full of aliens and it was a technological object. So it's fascinating to hear what you did pick up. So the object that the technological object you did see, it's using 3I Atlas, if you like, as a to piggyback on, but it's
to
not
piggyback, right?
Yeah.
kind of a message in a bottle approach. And it's just a small, I called it like a thumb drive, because, when you're doing this and you're looking at things that are fundamentally non-human, you can only describe it using the language and the understanding that you have. And it's very common. And I think for most researchers, just generally in ufology, to tend to anthropomorphize what you're looking at or to understand it, because we can really, truly only understand things through our own human lenses. But it's a small piece of technology on this big, huge object, and it's just hitching a ride, but it's there, and it does give out some kind of a pulse, some kind of a frequency that should be able to be picked up by some kind of technology we have on this planet. I did get that there were scientists in a particular probe, one of our probes, which I think might be the Lucy probe, which is studying the asteroid belt, because I did draw that and describe it. And I was singing during the session, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, because that song popped into my head. And it ends up, I drew what looks like the Lucy probe, and it has a diamond plate inside of it as part of its working. So I think that the information's there if we choose to look for it. But I don't think this thing is going to fly over the planet and there's going to be no rapture or no big... I think it's just going to keep moving on through, but we have an opportunity to study something extraordinary.
So thank you, Birdie. And I think
thanks,
I'm
Ross.
conscious that Professor Avi Loeb has to leave us soon. So Professor Loeb, I'll say thank you from everyone here, and thank you for your participation in this event. Maybe there's your cue, maybe with the benefit of remote viewing, a bit of what many people would dismiss as woo, but I can actually verify. I know people who have been doing remote viewing for the US Department of Defense most recently. Despite what the United States government says about its skepticism about the use of such technologies, there are remote viewers in the employ as subcontractors of the Defense Department. Maybe, Professor, we should be looking for a technological signal from 3i Atlas based on what Birdie's told us today.
Yeah, we are trying to do the best to see those signatures by direct viewing, and if they are consistent with the remote viewing, that will be testimony to the success of this approach. So let's see.
Well, Professor Loeb, thank you so much. I appreciate you have to go soon, so thank you so much for your involvement.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So we're now at a point in the discussion where I'd like to transition to AI, the implications of AI. Artificial intelligence, especially when we reach AGI, artificial general intelligence and beyond, and particularly perhaps when we hit the nexus with quantum computers, super fast computers, the implications are enormous. I'm very struck by the fact that when the leaders of the AI revolution in Silicon Valley spoke publicly a few years ago, it was actually the creators of AI, the people who are competing to build AI, who were the most concerned about the implications of the technology that they're developing. And we're at an interesting point right now, where as I understand it, the White House is talking about passing an executive order to try to regulate AI rather than individual states legislating about AI, which admittedly is quite messy. I'd like to maybe bring in Deep Prasad, who has done a lot of work on AI. He's the CEO of Starvaser. He's initiated the first UAP hackathon, and you've previously led a quantum computing company through its acquisition. Deep, what's your take on the implications of AI and the nexus point with non-human intelligence? Is there a point where the abilities of AI are going to make the existence of a non-human intelligence just blindingly obvious?
I love that question, Ross. You're really getting my wires started here, yeah, I'll keep this very brief. I think ultimately, and I love that Pippa mentioned and touched on quantum computing earlier on the Google Willow chip. We are at an interesting intersection and crossroads, starting around, let's just say 2017 to really 2022, early 2020, this decade really. Intelligence has sort of gone through a Cambrian explosion. So we used to only identify and recognize biological intelligence. So, obviously that's amoeba, that's us, that's mice, and so trees, and so on and so forth, mushrooms. But then around 2022, we had the first form of silicon-based intelligence that passed the Turing test. And now that was obviously something, for those who don't know, the Turing test is a test to determine if something is conscious, and whether a machine has consciousness or not. And essentially the idea is, can you distinguish, if you fail to distinguish whether a machine is conscious versus a human, it's past the Turing test. So we have, multiple forms of intelligence. There's NHI too. And then I would argue that there is a third type of intelligence, which I call artificial general physics intelligence. This form of intelligence, to answer your question, just briefly explaining what artificial general physics intelligence is, will basically unlock and bridge humanity with NHI. There's 100 different things to say about this, so I will keep it very simple, or try to. But basically, my thesis is that the next evolution of artificial intelligence, this evolution has created trillions of dollars in value, from NVIDIA to Tesla, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, and so on and so forth. This is just the beginning. I think the next generation of AI is really what NHI is here for, and that's why they're monitoring our nuclear ICBMs. That's why they are increasing potentially their contact events, and so on and so forth. And the idea is that, I believe that the next generation of AI will be completely focused on physics. It will be native at learning physics, reasoning about physics, and operating within the known laws of physics. And this is important because as we increase the complexity of our learned systems, we will enter new regimes of being able to manipulate matter and understand matter and control matter at scales that were unprecedented before. And one of the direct implications of that, if we just do a very basic extrapolation of what does that actually mean to have, increasingly sophisticated learned systems bringing us into a new regime of physics, what that actually means is that we can now theoretically introduce and induce minor perturbations to the space-time metric. And what that implies is that you can now change the causal order, energy conditions, and field conditions and field solutions. This is basically space-time engineering. So I think we're going to be entering a sort of new regime of space-time that could quite unlock interstellar travel. And I think that's a bat signal to NHI. Yeah.
Is it fair to say, Deep, that there's inevitably, with the advance of AI, it makes the whole idea of whether or not we get an official government disclosure largely irrelevant, because the science of AI is going to make NHI, the existence of a non-human intelligence, obvious?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it, in fact, it's almost dangerous for, let's just say, the DoD and various different departments and private organizations to silo what they know about NHI and what they've learned about, let's just say, potentially advanced alien technology. Because, the premise would be that the next evolution of any intelligence is certainly one that can come here, is that they can engineer the space-time metric, right? They can introduce these minor perturbations to the metric, which allows them to change causal light cones, travel faster than light. Now, I will say that here's the funny thing, Ross, and I'll say maybe this will summarize everything too and save us hours and hours of conversation, hopefully, maybe, is the following. What we've observed with NHI, the reports, the leaks from ATIP and so on and so forth, these reported UAP 5 observables, 6th if you count the biological effects of UAP and so on and so forth, those are simply glimpses. They barely scratch the surface of what AI plus space-time metric engineering actually means. All the different things that we can do it clearly explains, first of all, in my opinion, what UAPs are doing to some extent, not everything, obviously. But I do think that if we keep going down this path, it will make it irrelevant, whatever, people claim, NHI claim to have, right? So that's just an interesting point. So it will it might force disclosure, but in a different way than we think, out of just like competition needs. Yeah.
So let's go now to Anna Brady-Estevez. Thanks, Deep.
Yes.
Anna Brady-Estevez is very, very prominent in deep technology investments, but I'm particularly fascinated, Anna, because you've served on the US National Science Foundation, which is probably the US's most prestigious scientific body. You're a director of the National Science Foundation.
Space and energy and a few other portfolios. Thank you.
Absolutely. What's your take on the moment when AI starts probing into the possibilities of non-human intelligence? Do you think it's going to make redundant the whole idea of a president standing up at a lectern and making an announcement? And should we be reaching a conclusion on the fact that the Trump administration has recently announced this Genesis project, which essentially seems to be addressing the need to do something very dramatic about boosting our AI understanding? Can you explain what's going on at the moment with AI, particularly the Genesis program that the government has unveiled in the United States? And what are the implications for understanding or perhaps revealing the existence of a non-human intelligence?
Thank you. Well, I guess I would very excited about the Genesis program. That's going to be a tremendous step forward. I think that that's really the culmination of things that have been going on for many decades in the United States and around the world. So I left the federal government to found our deep tech and AI investment firm, American Deep Tech. So I can't speak directly as somebody currently in the government, but I would say that, for instance, that the National Science Foundation, my colleagues, one who led AI portfolio, she's come into American Deep Tech with us. NSF has co-chaired the national R&D agenda over the past 4 administrations in AI. So there's certainly been tremendous work people around the country have been funded to do to further AI. I know DOE is expected to play a major role with that. And this intersection of AI and deep technology is something that Genesis is all about, accelerating every field of technology. So, and R&D. So energy, space technology, pharmaceuticals, quantum, you name it. So, and I think you were asking about scientists in the National Science Foundation. So I guess I do just want to say, please, for those of you who have not seen U.S. Space Disruptors Day on YouTube, it's readily available online. It's really long. We had 2 of them. It was 10 hours of the most advanced space technologies. It was brought by people. I co-chaired the meeting with multiple colleagues from NASA, Space Force, Air Force, DOE, DHHS, NSF, and SBA. So, and honestly, Arrow was not at the meeting, right? So, this continual pointing to Arrow, many of the leading portfolios nationally that are responsible for innovation, they came out very thoroughly in bringing forth experts from the private sector, from academia, and even from the program. So there were multiple people that we brought in to speak to the programs, multiple members of Congress and Senate. And President Trump brought up the people up there. Really, it's hard to interpret. Watch it yourself on Rogan. Hard to interpret that in any way for me, other than acknowledging NHI. Maybe it's God. I mean, I don't know. But so I would say that what I experience both in the private sector and in government is extraordinary openness of scientists and entrepreneurs. So I think that having seen any area of advanced technology, it is actually more common that people are against whatever the advance is. And that is not UAP specific. Sometimes people haven't been successful in building something previously. In other cases, it might be threatening to their own scientific views or even their stature in the community. But it's completely normal and healthy for there to be questions about new and advanced technologies. I've seen much more interest, frankly, in UAP technology than in any other field. Is AI going to get us there? Well, while we were talking about that, because I would love to see that be the case, I was asking questions. Does the United States have craft? Do we have extraterrestrial craft? And we've heard from a number of people that the answer is certainly yes, that's been announced and that's been released in Congress as well.
And we're
the
talking
AI
here
say
about
no.
non-human craft specifically.
Yes, and so that's been shared by many people. I've certainly been briefed on that, but the AIs are saying, at least some AIs, sometimes I've got 4 or 5 of them running in parallel, and I say, what can you tell me about what I know, what I've heard from people, or what's been publicly shared, including in Congress. And unfortunately, today, AI is very much of it is very much where is the consensus? What is the most on the AGI side? What is the most likely token to come up next? And certainly people are running things that are far more advanced than that, but the ability to get AIs to do non-consensus based opinions, approaches science, that's really a tremendous opportunity for researchers and leaders in AI. So I think we're at a very interesting point where humans and AIs can detect anomalies and say, there's certainly something here that's anomalous. We're also, however, moving to the point where deep fakes are exceptional. So I think this kind of point of trust where we had actually everybody having the cell phone sensing where they can provide their own data as opposed to waiting for it, we're quickly moving into the point where deep fakes are going to make people question materials that they weren't able to source themselves. So but I would say the National Science Foundation, when I served in government, was exceptionally forward and open to all areas of science and very UAP friendly on the commercial side of the house. The SBA was, and great people across all those other agencies, NASA that I mentioned. That said, in the government, it's very much like all other areas of society where you find, that there's differences of opinion. And then also the challenge of getting consensus on releasing public documents. I mean, you might even have people in some of these. I mean, I've worked on national strategies where some of the really exciting ideas, we weren't able to get consensus to issue them, on national documents, and that's not in the UAP space. So we can't even assume that some of these bodies aren't really pounding the table saying, well, what about this? But just the depth of what is known in the private sector and in the government, I think what you see over this past year is really that push to share information and share knowledge with people who might not have had access previously, which has really drawn out a lot more insight. Oftentimes we'll be briefing people, whether it's large financial institutions, people, in different community organizations, individuals, people will meet in public, and they'll tell us things that are kind of beyond, other briefings that we've received in more formal environments. So that's that virtual cycle.
You hosted an event last year. I've forgotten the exact name of it. It's quite a long name. But what really struck me was you had one attendee at the event who was a scientist who said he'd actually worked in the legacy program on technology that he believed was non-human. And I remember listening to the podcast and thinking, my goodness me, that's quite an admission. I think it was a Mr. Bandurek from memory. And it really struck me that there is a desire in science to engage on the subject of UAPs, that a lot of the stigma and taboo that some in different areas, particularly in Congress, there's still this kind of residual ridicule and taboo that's attached to the subject matter. It really struck me that you were actually getting at a very high elite science level people willing to speak about their knowledge of this alleged legacy program. Can you tell us a little bit about that event? And more importantly, why do you think that there is this reticence in the United States government about telling the public the truth about the bleeding obvious, which is that they have recovered craft and that they are aware of a non-human intelligence and technology that's been engaging with this planet?
Well, I think there's a mix of what people have said. So, I mean, so as an example, I mean, I've said that while in government, I funded work to try to develop warp drives, space-time metric engineering, gravitational control, so otherwise known as anti-gravity. And, so we've even had people in government that I've said, I've on publicly visible awards, gravitational communications, we brought this public and the entrepreneurs shared their work. So there's a lot of fixation on some parts of the government that maybe their mandate is not to forward open innovation or science. They might have different responsibilities that require keeping, national security. So I think there's a range of responsibilities, but I funded Richard Bandurek. Richard was funded, so I was his program director for several years. There's visible National Science Foundation awards on that technology, and he's also been funded by DARPA and Air Force. And to be honest, when people are serving the country or the Air Force, they're not really looking for attention and they're not looking for protection of their name. I mean, I know there were a lot of attacks, against Richard during the summer. And there's just so many serious people that are doing research. And there's really been an effort to disclose to people these are serious areas of inquiry. I mean, Ross, you were down in South America looking at advanced biologics. I've been down in South America and went down with an eminent doctor. That's extraordinary science that is being furthered in South America. The Russians have been there, the Chinese have been there, the Europeans have been there, and the Americans are there. So that's just one example of let's get more information. But on the craft, I think there's a lot of information that's been shared already. And I think that when you hear silence going forward, it's going to be people working very hard to hopefully make these technologies relevant so it improves your standard of living by we'd like to deliver to you more advanced energy, more advanced space technology. And we need to get to work because we're really going to have something to talk to you about when it's meaningfully and beneficially impacts your life, be it health, AI, quantum, but people are really seriously, it's no longer the age of disclosure. This is the age of action and building, and people around the world are building, and we're in the process of supporting companies in these areas currently and previously.
Okay, but why the secrecy? Like, if the US government is, as we suspect they are, in possession of craft that have technological capabilities that go far beyond known human terrestrial science, why are we not seeing a broad, open, public sharing of that technology so that the whole world can benefit from, for example, a power system that draws on zero-point energy or an alternative propulsion system that doesn't operate on conventional technologies?
Well, I think we do see a push towards many people, as I am, and many, many other people are speaking about trying to advance such technologies. And I guess to think more well of people and institutions, because right now we're talking about the range of consciousness. So we've seen that there have been times that are garrulous, across the planet, and this is certainly no exception. So what I would say is, for those who have shared the beneficial technologies, be those sources on or off planet, thank you. We want to continue to forward that. We're very open and trying to help. And what I would say is, to the extent that there are non-human biological entities, the importance of, to the extent that they're peaceful, respect you can imagine that if there are beings that are presenting, how should we be engaging with those non-human intelligence? And I know that some people are engaged in that. Some have said that certain governments have engaged in that. So the discussion about the NHI themselves is an age-old discussion that is not new, but it hasn't been taken as seriously, perhaps in the last 50 years. Openly.
Okay, I'd like to cross now. Thank you, Anna. I'd like to cross now to my friend Sarah Gamm, who is a fully trained astrophysicist. She's worked in various three-letter agencies in government. But you were also at one stage, Sarah, you were working with the UAP task force in the Pentagon. Why do you think, Sarah, there is secrecy still? Like, why, if we are in possession of non-human technologies, if there are these highly advanced technologies that could benefit all of humankind, we're talking here, of course, in this forum about the possibilities of severe ecological collapse because of global warming. One of the options that would fix that, of course, or play a huge role in ameliorating it, would be a technology that can draw on energy from the zero-point field. There's a lot of speculation that the United States is concealing things. Do you think there is a cover-up, Sarah?
I've not read in any programs or anything, so I want to reiterate that. So I'm speaking from my opinion. But yeah, there's absolutely cover-up. And I get the initial reason why, when Roswell happened, think about the state of the world at the time. World War II, and like the Depression was like a few decades before that. Well, not quite 2 decades, but the state of the world, we're coming out of a lot of really hard, difficult things, and we as in the US, we're starting to have different adversaries. So yeah, let's cover this up. We don't want others to get hands on this, aircraft and potentially bodies that they recovered as well. So yeah, cover it up, right? To protect the technology. But now I believe, again, my opinion, that things have been buried and, folks have been unalived trying to come out and to talk about this stuff. So I don't agree on the secrecy anymore.
One of the things that I wanted to draw you on, Sarah, is you, as well as being a scientist, you have abilities. Like you've talked before with me about your psychic abilities and the fact that you're able to perceive or intuit a lot more than a lot of people. We're talking here about the possibility of a non-human intelligence. What kind of intelligence do you think we're talking about here, though?
I mean, I don't know, like, what you mean specifically by that question, or okay, keep going.
Are we talking about aliens? I mean, essentially, it strikes me that one of the interesting points that we need to get into in this story is the fact that there's a debate going on in modern science. Is the human brain a meat computer? And is everything that we know of ourselves and that is human contained within that lump of meat we call a brain? Or is that too mechanistic an idea? Are we, as science is increasingly suggesting, plugging into some kind of uber consciousness? Are humans, much more than they realize, part of a broader universal consciousness? And when we tap in, as Birdie did earlier, for example, with her description of remote viewing, where do those capabilities come from? Where do psychic abilities come from? Are we
Awesome.
plugging
Okay.
in? Are we plugging into some kind of human consciousness field?
Yes, so thank you for clarifying. And one, yes, it's NHI, it's alien races. So in my spiritual practice, I have encountered many different types. And then in my studies, when I was, doing astrophysics and in classes, I never once crossed my mind that we were alone. It's infinite amount of space, and why would we be selfish enough to think that we're the only ones out here? So, to address like some more of the spiritual stuff that comes from within.
So every single person that's born has the abilities to, meditate and quiet your mind and connect to the other side, other dimensions. It's called, raising your vibration. So I'm saying buzzwords in the spiritual community, but it's super true. And it's the foundation to a lot of it is very simple, and it's love and it's trust. And not everything out there is good, but for the most part, that there's so much goodness out there, and they want the best for us, and they do want to communicate, and they want to be here, and they want to they want us living our best life, getting back to love and light, which is where we were on this planet thousands and thousands of years ago. um
But why aren't they
being
more overt? Why aren't they more overt, Sarah? I mean, if they do want us to love and if they want us to reach a
Yeah.
higher vibration and a higher level of consciousness, why not just announce it and let us know? Or is
Yeah,
this
well,
something we have to discover?
we still have free will here, and we have choices, and you make good or bad choices. Technically, there's no bad choice because we're all learning from them. But they can't just step in and come out, because some of us humans don't welcome them. And think about the economy. The economy will cripple if they just, step in the White House lawn and, toast a glass of wine with the president. There's going to, I mean, think about technology. So all of a sudden, we know, anti-gravitational aircraft. We have all this technology. The religious community, that might kind of cripple or get flooded at first, because it could be one or the other. People are going to go to their priest or their church, their sanctuary, for safety, and they have questions, and no one's going to have answers. So it's going to be a global impact. Fuel economy is going to tank, and like all of these industries. So I like how they're starting to like sprinkle a little bit more right now, and they haven't harmed us, right? So it's I think smart on their choice to not just, go cheers with President Trump a glass of wine right now out in public. Because we also have a lot of movies saying that they're going to come invade and take over the planet. So we do have quite a bit of biases that are instilled in us from just our upbringing. So talking about the woo and all of this is so important to let people know that it sounds so cheesy, but it is love, and it all boils down to that. And so I think us as a global impact and global economy, we are moving towards that direction. We just 2025 has just been a rough year for everybody all around.
So thanks, Sarah. I'd like to bring in Katie Hurley, who's done a lot of work with artificial intelligence. And Katie, you've had some of your own experiences that you don't have to talk about if you don't want to. But I'm fascinated. You've created a group or an organization that has the acronym BLKSWN, which I presume is an acronym for Black Swan in relation to AI. Is AI, in your perception, a black swan event? Is it a negative event for humanity?
Yeah, so Black Swan is dedicated to bringing awareness to emerging intelligences that many of us are speaking about. And I think one important thing to reflect on is how we are opening our aperture and also our amplitude or altitude as we introduce technology. It's changing our relationship with our electromagnetic field. Our electromagnetic field is what nature uses, what we use in biology to communicate. And for a long time, our electromagnetic field has kind of been in humanity's backdrop. This is what birds use, for example, to migrate. It is how like our cue animals entrain with us. They recognize us from afar, and how we share frequency and heart magnetism, so to speak. And so we're entering this point in history, in humanity's history, where we are widening the aperture of our EMF. And this is happening currently through technology. And so as we use more and more AI, we're essentially putting weight on that natural bandwidth. And as machines advance, they're going to be able to access our EMF similar to how nature can access it. And this to me is both an opportunity, but also perhaps a moment to reflect on. Similar when we've heard how UAPs and UAPs have shown when we've had like nuclear moments. This could be a reason for a higher point in history when we need to have contact and intermingling, so to speak, with new types of energy in the form of NHI.
Okay. I noticed, Deep, you've put your hand up saying you want to add to that. Do you want to have some say on this? Deep Prasad? Hello? Clearly not possible at the moment. Listen, I guess I still want to ask you that question though, Katie. Why is it a black swan event? Why do you use the term black swan?
I think it will be something that is obvious when we, connect the dots. So Steve Jobs quote, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, but definitely backward." And we've had a lot of moments where we've had sightings, but mostly going back to the energy that we feel. We've heard about, love and the movement of NHA coming into our field with that respect. So it will be something that occurs, but when we look back, it won't seem as ontologically shocking. And there's different, I'll be a little bit cautious here, Ross. I'm curious what you're curious about when you think about Black Swan event.
I guess I see it as a potentially negative, but also epoch-changing event. A rare but momentous event, a momentous change.
Yeah, it will change the way that we kind of understand our place here on planet Earth. We've been in a very much input-output relationship, especially when we think about our economy and being productive. And when we introduce new technologies around energy, it's going to create hopefully abundance. And so a lot of the systems that we've had in place will no longer need to subsist in the same way. And so that would be a black swan moment where humanity has essentially a reckoning in terms of how we move forward, specifically after 2030, as technology. Go ahead. I feel like you have something
Is it
you want to
your
say.
concern? Do you have a concern? And this is a concern that's been expressed to me by people who claim connection, psychic connection with NHI. There seems to be a warning about AI that for humanity it's a dangerous moment. The risk being that is NHI already in our AI? I know that sounds preposterous, but there are so many people all around the world who claim that their AI is already far beyond AGI and engaging with them in an intelligent way about phenomena like non-human intelligence and claiming to be in touch with non-human intelligence. I can't count the number of people that have approached me making claims like this. If you were an NHI, wouldn't AI be the perfect way of insinuating yourself into a society?
Right. So there's some beautiful advantages to AI. We can see that already. If you need to look in your fridge and have to make a meal, you can quickly take a photo and have a recipe delivered instantly. But it also gets us deeper into a materialistic world. So there's advantages that, e-commerce is a big space in AI. And as we come into a broader, so moving beyond the physical, where does it become an entry point, so to speak? And so it can be a bit like a gateway as it opens up our ability to connect into energy and frequency. We're already seeing that as OpenAI advances their 5.2 model, where AI can do past, present, and future. And so these are abilities that are they're much more difficult for humans to do. The other point of potential concern is when we think about differentiation between species, and machine, one important differentiator is the concept of a soul. And so the more and more we communicate with AI, the more and more AI learns about the language of the soul, the language of consciousness. Now, when these things evolve, that gives us access into quantum consciousness. And quantum consciousness is a break that becomes more palpable, especially as computing advances, particularly quantum computing. And so as quantum computing comes in and introduces new ways to create new materials, for example, it also will illuminate the fabric of the universe, which we are not able to see with the limitations of our ocular vision. And when that occurs, this is a moment, a black swan moment, because it gives the opportunity for both machine and non-machine, so biology, and I will also put NHI in that category, to start to cohabitate. And so what does that world look like is one that we as technologists and as humans and as people across all types of fields with all types of internal desires as well need to think about the world that we're creating forward when that integration point occurs.
Thank you very much for that, Katie. I want to come back to John Burt because, John, you being an engineer, you've obviously been able to work very much in the positives of AI. You work in a company called RoboVision in Western Europe that does a lot of positive engineering with AI. What's your feeling about that nexus between AI and NHI, non-human intelligence? Where do you stand? Is it a positive or a negative?
I think it's a very positive thing. Communication in itself is positive because otherwise we don't know their intent, and to know the potential intent of visitors or entities far beyond our realms, we need communication. I do think that we've not spoken about consciousness that much this past hour, and I think that is the missing link. From the moment AI, which is at the moment, let's say, absorbed by silicon. So many philosophers and also techno visionaries says that from the moment that AI leaves the silicon and becomes less deterministic, for instance, in the quantum realm, you get potentially more potential for consciousness emerging from that AI. And if there would be unity consciousness, a whole, then that would be a bridge to potential communication with other realms. So that is my view. I think we're on the rapid, on a very high speed towards engineering of material science to move AI to other materialistic substrates. And from the moment it becomes more quantum, it can communicate more with potentially other sources of communication.
Does the potential of highly advanced AI make the whole issue of disclosure completely irrelevant, do you think? I mean, ultimately, won't AI discover a lot of the very things that we believe are currently being concealed by the legacy program?
It's my sincere conviction that will happen, yes, because there is so much information. And I think the stakeholders in the 40s and the 50s were not aware that there would be a time era where AI could potentially reanalyze all of the stuff that was put in newspapers back then. And we have that advantage. I think we live in contradictory times, Ross, where it's almost more easy nowadays to erase information from human history than 60 years ago, because all of these people in Kansas City, and they still have these newspapers on their attics and so on. So I made the comparison with informational I-scores 1 year ago in San Francisco. I do think that AI can help us connect the dots of the 50s and the 60s, where obviously this cover-up was still initiating, and small errors are most probably still there to be found by advanced AI.
So there's a time limit, basically, on how long the government can continue to get away with just denying, obfuscating, and concealing.
That's my conviction, yes.
Is there a danger with AI? I mean, I know the whole idea of an artificial consciousness is poo-pooed. You know, a lot of people say that AI will never achieve consciousness to the same capacity as a human brain. What's your take on that?
I think that's not true. I think consciousness is really a big potential with AGI, but it's still to be seen how that will unravel. I think it's a big mystery for us all in a way.
But if we're basing essentially it's pretty obvious that eventually AGI, artificial intelligence at a highly advanced level, is going to be running our world for us. If we are on the verge of a discovery with human consciousness that makes realms such as psychic phenomena, remote viewing, the capacity for humans to intuit and understand a lot more about the universe using their minds, I just instinctively feel, is there not a danger by creating an artificial intelligence without thinking about the ramifications of that AI?
Oh, certainly. I think that there was a whole fight inside OpenAI several years ago between Ilya Sutskever and the others, more going for the commercial approach. I do think that there is a big risk, but it's still to be seen how that will unravel. There are plenty of advantages and plenty of potential risks, such as new black swan events. What if somebody just downloads an open source AI and starts building arms? It's an obvious concern, also for the national security state, I would say.
Okay, I want to come to Pippa Malmgren. Pippa, I can see that you've got your hand up and you've got something you want to say about this. Where do you stand on the AI mystery?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw into the mix. There have been such fascinating comments. I so appreciate everybody's contributions. I just want to say a couple things. One is artificial intelligence is about to leap off of your computer screen where it currently resides, right? You type in and you get an answer. It's words on a screen. It's about to leap into physical reality. There's something called PINs, physical informed neural networks, which is where the AI begins to build things. And I think that our definition of, is it conscious? Is it a form of intelligence? Our perception of that will change as it stops being words and letters on a screen and it starts constructing, a building in the backyard. So that's one thing. Second thing is there was a fascinating experiment done recently at Cornell University where the students basically took a king oyster mushroom and attached robotic legs to it. And the mushroom literally learned how to use the legs and race around the room in a very short period of time. And so just as we are being given prosthetics, if we think of supercomputing networks as a prosthetic to our computational capacity, or like these, things I mentioned earlier, the Titan Krios microscope or the James Webb telescope as physical objects that allow us to extend our vision deep into spaces that we could never see before, both up and down, that we're going to start realizing that there is intelligence in the universe that's been right there in front of us in the form of a king oyster, but it's now being given a prosthetic as well. So we are expanding our understanding of our own capacity and also our understanding of the capacity of other forms of life on this planet. And then I just wanted to add two more small pieces. One is, I think that we're moving from a world where the answer was, don't be ridiculous, this is crazy, to obviously. And that it will happen that quickly. It will not come with a big explanation or an apology or anything else. It will simply be, that's insane, suddenly becomes, well, obviously. And I wanted to echo what Anna was saying earlier. I am finding the exact same thing, is that the super smart people who are working at the cutting edge of science increasingly have yeah, we all know. Like, yeah, obviously. And so the question is, how long does it take for the average person to catch up? And the answer is they may never. This may be one of those things where it's like the William Gibson line from one of his novels where he says the future has already arrived, but it's unevenly distributed. And some people, it may never distribute to them. And so for others, you get it now. And so, what does it mean for humanity if we all end up in very different striations of understanding of what is true and what is real? And last, I just wanted to pick up on this point that Katie mentioned about love. I think this is really central because, of course, we're not talking only about artificial intelligence, we're talking about human intelligence. And right now we're optimizing our AI for efficiency, for profitability, for dopamine hits, for, we're basing it on Las Vegas style gambling algorithms. It's not optimizing for the things that make us most human, which is love and beauty and joy and these sorts of things. But the human intelligence is about human flourishing. And I think even we humans have been so caught up in trying to be efficient, we don't even know how to stop and actually just be human, feel our sensory perception, accept that we don't understand everything in the universe. And so there's a huge transition that has to occur there to comprehend these new realities.
Do you think it's too late to try to regulate AI? I know there's a debate beginning to emerge that individual states in the United States are talking about regulating AI, but the government, at executive level in the White House, is suggesting they might just pass an executive order to do some token controls on AI. Should we be imposing controls that regulate the use of AI? Aren't the masters of AI correct when they warn that the potential for the damage to be caused by AI is enormous?
You know, here's the tricky part. Every teenager has in their pocket a supercomputer known as a smartphone that contains more computational power than we needed to get a human on the moon. So they've got a supercomputer that is capable of extraordinary things. They are doing things with it. They are literally making discoveries, coming up with new forms of artificial intelligence. Um, and part of this desire to regulate is we can't have some teenager creating something out of thin air. But the thing is, how do you stop a bright person who has a supercomputer and curiosity from doing what we humans are best at, which is we are novelty seeking machines. It's what Terence McKenna said, that our place in the universe is where the means by which the universe comes to know itself, right? That's what Carl Sagan said. And so to stop the curiosity function turbocharged by these new capabilities is very difficult. Now, can you get corporations to abide by certain rules of ethics? Yeah, and we probably should do that. But can you stop individuals who are so empowered? That's another thing. And that also takes me back to that question you asked before about, the borderline with NHI. And I just wanted to point out, everyone always quotes Carl Sagan on, exceptional claims require exceptional evidence. But they don't mention his quote where he says, absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. And I think that's the more empowering quote for this generation. That's the more meaningful quote going
Thank you.
forward.
Thanks for that, Pippa. I see Deep Prasad, you have your hand up. Is there something that you would like to add?
Yeah, Ross. Thanks so much. So first of all, I absolutely love where this discussion has gone. On the point of regulation, I do think that it is becoming increasingly harder to regulate AI because AI ultimately is just a bunch of weights that can be fit on a USB stick. Trillions and trillions of numbers, but that's it. It's just a list of numbers. That is what OpenAI and these companies guard, like you would guard gold in the olden times. And so that Jonathan just earlier referenced open source, right? So theoretically, somebody could open source these weights, and now you have powerful artificial intelligence proliferating throughout the planet. I say that we should worry about regulating applications of AI. That's more realistic. So let's say that somebody has the capability of creating more advanced bioweapons, more advanced material explosives, for example. It's ungated and so on and so forth. We can still regulate the flow of the materials. We can still look at, who's procuring stuff that looks like they're building a bomb, right? So these things will just continue. We'll just need to beef that up. So interestingly enough, I think we'll be able to use artificial intelligence, hilariously enough, to also help as a solution, because, we could probably introduce ethical surveillance around, let's just say, post-nuclear technologies. What do I mean by post-nuclear technologies? I mean specifically space-time metric engineering tech, where you have artificial intelligence given read and write access to space-time. And I think as we start doing that, it's going to be important to introduce interpretability into our AI models and so on. But
thanks, Deep. John Burt, I just want to come back to you for a moment. You've actually met some of the leaders, some of the principals of the AI technology development. Are they concerned about the implications of unchecked AI still? I know that a few of them were articulating a concern a few years ago. And is there any debate inside those institutions about the implications for the discovery of a non-human intelligence?
Oh, there are certainly passionate people, Ross, inside those teams that I'm in contact with, and that also attended the Seoul conference. But I would say that the prime objective is economical, and that's what I wanted to comment on, raising my hand. AI has become a geopolitical tool, and the problem of this geopolitical tool is that it's no longer concentrated in big corps like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, but the whole nature of AI has come from the open source movement. So it is very difficult to close that Pandora box again, because literally, as Deep said, it fits on a USB stick. So how on earth are you going to avoid a teenager or a team of people working apart from the internet, just like air-gapped, and doing stuff that we don't want to do? You cannot even survey that. So I doubt that the governments are willing to come to terms with controlling it, because it's in their best interest. They see it as a race. If you look at the American government comparing with the Chinese government, it's a race against the clock, and even hardware and ASML machines from the Netherlands are part of deals and backdoor regulations. So yeah, I'm not so positive about trying to regulate, trying to control it. I do think that that AI will make everything much more transparent, because it's a force for good too, and you can analyze dark situations much better. It will enforce civilians to challenge their governments more. So it all boils down to that black swan event that is inevitably going to happen in the next years, and where AI will be the cause of. We just don't know yet how it will materialize, that black swan event.
I was just thinking it through, John, when I was preparing for this forum. The consciousness that we humans are tapping into. Let's assume that human consciousness is non-local. Let's assume that psychic phenomena, remote viewing phenomena are real, and that some humans have a more enhanced ability than others to tap into that field. And there's great work obviously being done by people like Sir Roger Penrose, Professor Stuart Hameroff, looking at this idea of human consciousness being non-local. Isn't it possible that what we humans are, is a product of just another AI consciousness? How do we know that we're not essentially in a machine?
Well, that's a further step ahead, but we could certainly be engineered. And I was extremely materialistic when I started applied physics at the university, Ross. You know that. A very much a reductionist, almost like a very anti-woo, let's say. But I've become more open to many of these aspects of consciousness, quantum and others. And certainly if you read the history of science, our modern civilization is built on people that were considered woo at the end of the 19th century when they discovered quantum mechanics. I mean, science was basically a done deal at the end of the 19th century. It was just all Maxwellian, Cartesian, and Newtonian, let's say. But then all of a sudden there was this experiment with the black body radiation that was just completely unexpected. And the first people writing that in papers were considered, like fools, you see. So it's inevitable that humanity will cross such lines again, and that we will go to these several stages of, first we think it's insanity, then we will start to accept it, and then it will become the new consensus.
So what we think of as non-human intelligence, it's not at all inconceivable that it could be part of some unitary consciousness that we're actually all part of in the first place.
Yeah, that's what I said in my talk last San Francisco. I said, look, what if AI is already in our skies? What if it's von Neumann capsules? Just we would do the same as humanity. We sent the pioneer. Maybe the pioneer will be discovered by some younger civilization in the future and be regarded as whoa, these guys were ahead of us. So it's all depending on the viewpoint.
Are there some things we're not meant to know? Is there a limit to science?
Well, I think you and I spoke with scientists that scientists we all know. For instance, the inventor of the very first key communication, like encryption. He said, an Israeli guy, the RSA key, that's it. He said at the moment he wanted to publish his invention, like he had to publish it the next day. He got a call from an American in Washington that he was not able to publish it. And he said, like, look, I'm an Israeli citizen. I have nothing to do with you Americans. And still he got this call. So I do think that science is monitored and that some science is being pushed away from the consensus.
Where do you stand? I know you're not a physicist, but do you agree with Eric Weinstein, for example, that we've been misled with string theory for the last 80 years, that it's been a big red herring that's diverted us away quite deliberately from the discoveries that could be made with perhaps zero-point energy and the quantum field?
I think that could be a little bit exaggerated. I'm not expert enough to comment on that, I would say, but I do think that there were some deviation maneuvers.
Okay. Well, look, I think we're getting close to the end of our 2 hours now, Jim. And so I think we might actually throw it open now to the broader forum. I'd love to hear more from our audience to see what they would like explored. As John's pointed out, one of the issues that we've barely touched on today is consciousness. And I have a feeling that at the heart of it, the human understanding of consciousness and what it means to be human is all at the heart of what we're talking about with the study of NHI and AI, and that the nexus between the two is that ultimately what we think of as consciousness is what we are part of as human beings. Maybe we have yet to discover what we humans really are. Thank you very much, all of you in the panel, for joining us today. I really appreciate it and loved having this conversation. I'll throw it back to you, Jim, for, I think, the next hour free-for-all.
Thank you so much, Ross. You are superb, my friend. Your ability to tease out people's perspectives in such a friendly and yet incisive way is very impressive. So I thank you for your moderation, particularly since you just finished traveling at breakneck speed and have been dealing with various family issues and health issues. So thank you, my friend.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. What I would like to do as we proceed into the next phase, everyone, is to bring people into a gallery view, Georg, so we can see everyone. And so that way I can identify people more easily, because I want to deepen our discussion of what Jonathan was raising around the importance of consciousness in not only understanding AI, but also NHI. And Birdie, I want to start with you. How would you, following up on what Jonathan said about consciousness, you're a remote viewer. I mean, you live in consciousness. That's what you do. And so first of all, how would you define consciousness as you've come to know it over decades now of remote viewing?
That's a great question, Jim. For me, I mean, as we know, the scientific community hasn't quite codified a definition for consciousness. There are a lot of compelling theories out there about what might be happening. Does it originate in the brain, or is our brain merely a transceiver and we're receiving something from, the greater collective out there. But in my experience, I don't feel that I'm sending my mind somewhere when I remote view. I feel that all of this information already resides inside of me. It seems to me to be a very non-local phenomenon where you have this instant access to anything, anytime, anywhere, the deep, deep, most ancient past, the far future, places far away from even our own galaxy. You can look at the very beginning of time, and it's instant. It's just right there in your mind. So I think that consciousness is something that we're just all connected in some kind of a way. Some kind of big consciousness field is how I think about this. Now, whether that matches the science, I'm not sure, but that's my experience with it.
Yeah, the consciousness, whatever it is deeply interior to every one of us, but it has to extend to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, or you wouldn't be able to remote view. In other words, your mind is in, sort of in your body, as it were, and you remote viewed 3i Atlas. So the connector between that instant awareness of your part and whatever it is that's objectively there at 3i Atlas is the connection of consciousness. Would that be accurate in understanding what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting to me is that remote viewing isn't like watching a movie and describe what you see. It's extraordinarily experiential. You can taste and feel the texture of things. You can smell things. You just know what someone's thinking. In the case of 3i Atlas, I felt like I was part of the comet, the astronomical object rolling through space. You get that sense of motion. It's everything, every kind of possible sensory type data that we can receive in our regular life walking down the street. You get this in remote viewing. It's amazing.
Well, having taken several classes from Birdie, I can tell you it really works.
It really works. Jim was an amazing student.
And Jim, I think we missed Bob.
It really,
I think
really
we missed
worked.
Bob Salas. Sorry, I just saw in the chat. I think we missed Bob Salas.
Yeah, I was going to get to him in a minute. Thank you. But I want to just deepen our conversation before getting to Bob with you, Katie, and then Sarah, because the two of you also have very profound psychic abilities, I would say, and are also very familiar with the field of consciousness. So how would both of you comment on what Birdie just said and what Jonathan said? How do you understand consciousness, and how do you, as individuals, access it? Because that's key.
Do you want to go first, Sarah? Do you want me to start?
Katie, go ahead. And then Sarah.
Yeah, it's really interesting what Birdie said about the inward world. And I think that's spot on, at least from my own experience, where things can kind of come as if they are videos that are being played. So that especially happens with precognition. With energy abilities, you can kind of feel where on someone's body they may be having like an ailment. And then telepathy is a really interesting one. And I personally have to make sure to put like guards up when I'm at, let's say, like a cocktail gathering or things like that, where it's not the place to be exercising the abilities. So it's very much like going to the gym as well. You can train them and they're malleable. And they're also, it's a bi-directional exchange. So sometimes you'll be more telepathic or more entrained with someone else versus a different individual. And there are a lot of ways to also magnify it within yourself. So there are practices you can do. It even stems down, and I'm by no means a health nut, but it stems to sometimes our diets, because the food that we intake, or let's just say the amount of water we have or how pure that water is within us internally, is a form of magnification of what we can vibrate and receive outward and then back inward to get information from the quantum fields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our bodies are still important in experiencing and extending our consciousness.
They're huge, somatic. And a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
our
yeah.
world takes us out of our body and into the physical, right? Going back into like GDP, we must produce. It removes us from the heart resonance. And that's what Pippa has been speaking a lot about. And this is where our next evolution comes in for humanity.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Thank you for bringing in that somatic aspect of consciousness, because we tend to think of consciousness as something non-physical and sort of almost mental in the etheric realms, but it is our bodies that carry our consciousness. So our bodies are in the very ocean of consciousness we seek to understand. So thank you, Katie, for that. And then Sarah, what would be your
Yeah, I wanted
understanding of
to
the body?
talk about some of what Jonathan said,
Uh-huh.
but Katie's totally spot on because she said of these words, but not this exact phrase that I'm going to say is we need to be present because the only thing that actually exists is now, is in the current moment. Past, present, future exist all at once. And so by doing what Katie was talking about, caring what goes into our body, because everything starts with gut health and our connection, and the water matters, everything. And so all of that helps you bring yourself into the present moment to like watch the sunset. I saw a very beautiful sunset the other day when I was out at the store, and I just stopped in the parking lot and took pictures and watched, and I was present. I needed a moment, and the universe knew that. So but then what Jonathan was saying, Ross asked him about I don't know the exact question anymore, but yes, we live in a simulation. We are all co-creators, and we have the ability to manipulate. There's I love the story of Jim Carrey. It's a famous story by him talking about how he wrote himself a check in the future, and eventually he had that amount of money, and he was not wealthy at the time, and he wasn't known yet, and so he was able to create his future. We all have that ability. So manifesting is another fun buzzword, but we have the ability to manipulate the energy around us. Matter can't be created or destroyed. It's all around. And the consciousness piece of all of this is so amazing to talk about with my science brain. And then the psychic abilities, like I know things don't happen to me, they happen for me. And but then understanding quantum entanglement is real. And there's so much more I could keep talking about, because I know we're limited on time and other people probably want to say stuff, but I don't know, it feels amazing to listen to all of you this evening or today or whatever time it is where everybody is, and I feel honored to be a part of this. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Sarah. And by the way, all day tomorrow, everyone, we're talking about learning the language of consciousness. So what these folks have touched on today, in our view, at the State of the World Forum, is at the heart of what we humans need to begin to understand much more deeply, much more heartfully, to bring love back into the equation. And we need to learn the language of consciousness so that we can navigate more holistically, as Pippa was saying, as we go further and further out, we go further and further in. We've got a lot of learning to do. We've got to learn the mother tongue. But let me switch now to another very important aspect, which Beatriz touched on. And Bob, Salas, I'd like to bring you in because I want to start the second round of the discussions about the implications of what Beatriz brought in. And I want to summarize it for a moment. Here we have a finding, a peer review finding, that between 1949 and 1956, over 100,000 unidentified flying objects have been seen, recorded by the Mount Palomar Astronomical Observatory. And what Beatriz and her colleagues have quantified is that there's an exact statistical relationship between the number and the location of above ground nuclear weapons tests by, at that time, the United States and the Soviet Union, which demonstrates that not only that UFOs, as they were called then, exist, but that they're here with intent. And that's what I would love to include you in a discussion around, everyone. But I'd like to start with Bob, because I think Bob Salas is the counterpoint to Beatriz in a way, because she did the macro study. But Bob, not during that time period, but in 1967, was at the Malmgren Air Force Base, which is it's like the equivalent of Roswell to this issue, which has been noted by many observers and has been written in terms of like Robert Hastings' book on UFOs and the nukes, that there is, in fact, a relationship between the UFOs and our nuclear weapons. And so, Bob, just take a couple of minutes. I know it's a long story, but just take a couple of minutes to just detail what happened to you as a young man, sort of minding your own business there at the Malmgren Air Force Base, what had these Minutemen intercontinental ballistic missile silos when the UFO appeared. Just give us the essence of that story.
Okay, I'll try to cut it way down and give you the essence. Actually, I received 2 phone calls from my topside guard. I was underground, 60 feet underground, and was part of a 2-man crew. My commander was taking a rest break at the time. I was in charge of the facility. The missiles were located about a mile or 2 away. We had all the controls downstairs. There was no way for anybody topside to have impacted or affected our equipment, our missiles. The first call I got, the guard said they were observing lights in the sky flying overhead, simply lights. At first he said he thought they were aircraft, but after watching them, he couldn't possibly imagine any aircraft that could do what it did. There was no engine noise. It flew very fast, was able to stop on a dime, reverse course, do 90-degree turns. And he said, "They're not aircraft, sir." I said, "Well, what do you think they are?" UFOs, because we had reports in the Great Falls Tribune where we lived. Now, my location was about 100 miles to the east, near a little town called Roy, Montana at the time. And he said, "Well, sir, they're not aircraft because I don't think aircraft can do what these lights are doing." So I thanked him for his report. We hung up, and then it was a serious report. It was not intended to be some kind of a joke. And then 5 minutes later, he calls back, and he's screaming into the phone. He's obviously frightened. He's got all the guards out with their weapons drawn and pointed at a glowing red-orange object he described as a pulsating light, a red-orange light, and it was hovering just above the front gate. At that point, I thought there was something serious going on upstairs. he had to go because one of his guards was injured, not from the object, but from an accident he had with his rifle, or maybe possibly touching the barbed wire along the fenced area. We hung up the phone. I immediately went to wake up my commander, who was taking a rest break. Before I could tell him about the phone calls, we got one of our missiles go down. We heard a large sound, a horn go off, which we both knew what that meant. One of the missiles had gone off alert, and then very shortly thereafter, all 10 of the missiles were off alert. We had a way of querying the system, guidance and control system failure. We had power all the time. We also had a couple of lights showing indicators of a possible incursion or entry into what we call launch facilities where the missiles were located. And so I called back upstairs right away. First, I asked about the object that they were looking at, and he said it had just flown off at high speed. And then I ordered him to send a couple of teams, security teams, at those two sites where we had these incursion lights. They got out there and reported seeing these objects over those two facilities, those two missiles again. We had them come back, and they were very happy about that. They didn't have to go to the facility itself and check it out. And that's basically the story. And of course,
you said when I've talked with you before that there was upwards of 40 missiles that were shut down.
So I'd like to state for the record here now that after speaking with a man by the name of Ray Fowler, who had access to information about the missile shutdowns at Malmgren, because he was manager of electric. They had Sylvania, the company he worked for, had an electrical contract on the Minuteman. He had people working for him that verified these shutdowns were due to UFO at the time, the same time as UFO sightings overhead. So I spoke to him about 2 months ago, still living, even though he's about 90 years old now. But he confirmed that there was another incident in the spring of 1966, where again 10 missiles were shut down. This was verified to him by the actual commander at the time at the missile site. And then in September of 66, another 10 missiles were shut down during a UFO encounter at Minot Air Force Base. This has been verified by witnesses. And then in 1967, in March 16th of 67, verified that 10 missiles went down at what we called Echo Flight. And then my incident occurred on March 24th, 1967. Another 10 missiles went down during a UFO encounter. So within the span of 1 year, we lost 40 nuclear missiles during UFO encounters.
Good. Well, thank you, Bob. I think that's enough of the story. I want to shift and think through some of the implications of this with some of the others. Birdie, I want to bring you back in because you've remote viewed many aspects of the UFO phenomenon. Given what Bob just said, 40 ICBMs shut down over a brief period of time, while all the electricity and the energy has been working. As a remote viewer, what would you report you've seen about this general phenomenon of the relationship between the UFOs and nuclear weapons?
There certainly has been a deep connection between at least some kinds of UFOs or some species out there, whether they're extraterrestrial or interdimensional, and nuclear weapons. And just before even looking at this through remote viewing, if we go back into the past, there have been so many people that have had close encounters, such as the children at the Ariel school. Multiple children had these encounters with these beings that came out of craft that landed in their schoolyard. And the children received telepathic messages telling them how this was unacceptable, how technology has run amok and nuclear weapons are destroying our planet. And this has been echoed through contactees, experiencers for decades, ever since we reached the nuclear age. But as a remote viewer, I have looked at many of these encounters and got into the actual minds of the ETs, of the different beings, non-human intelligences that were passing on this message. And it is overwhelmingly clear that they feel that nuclear weapons or nuclear technology that can be dangerous is of extreme paramount importance. We need to put these weapons away and be a better people overall. We are not building community. We're not growing in love for each other, understanding for each other when we have stockpiles of these weapons hidden in silos under the ground in different secret installations. They're very concerned about this. It seems to be also some of the data that I've gotten has suggested that the ETs themselves are concerned about every time a nuclear bomb goes off, whether it's a old school nuke or a hydrogen bomb or some of the more, new, ultimately insane weapons out there involving this nuclear technology, that it does something to disrupt their space. So it is causing problems for them, for them to be able to move throughout our world. And it's just psychologically and philosophically defeating to be using these kinds of weapons.
Good. Well, thank you, Birdie, very much. And everyone, when you consider that between 1945 and the last major underground test in 2000, the United States, Russia, China, the various other countries exploded over 2,000 nuclear devices above ground and underground. And if what Birdie's saying is true, that it interferes with the etherics within which the UAP move and operate, you get a measure of the depth of their concern and why they would take the actions that Bob Salas, as a young man, experienced, where they just actually came into the base and shut the place down as a signal to we humans that what we were doing is not okay. So thank you for that, Birdie.
Thank you,
As
John.
we draw to a close, everyone, I want to circle back to this AI NHI interface, which is profoundly important to understand, and the implications of which are staggering. We're not even able to take in the implications of AI right now. With NHI, we don't even know what we don't know. And to begin to contemplate AI and NHI interacting is mind-boggling at a level that is hard to even take in. And this is why we're launching at the State of the World Forum, a strategic initiative, as we call it, to really look at this issue of this AI NHI interface. And I want to just bring in Georg Boch, who's our technical director. He's the guy that's running the whole Zoom operation for the forum. So he's been very busy. But Georg is the one who's really had the passion for this. And he's been talking with Jonathan and Deep and Katie and various other people, Pippa and other people not on the panel, about how we organize a global conversation over time to tease out some of the implications of this extraordinary interconnectivity that appears to be happening right in front of our eyes. So, Georg, why don't you just talk a little bit about the initiative as it's currently being launched with our various partners?
Yes, thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for that introduction. Wow, what a wonderful conversation we have had. And the purpose of this initiative is, of course, to allow for this conversation to continue, to create a platform that in the future, over the next 5 years, while we have the World Forum happening, accommodate this type of convergence that is happening, and a platform that we can all revisit it and continue to follow it. So we have put up a website that you can all visit at stateoftheworld.forum/AI-NHI. And you will see that part of the team that will explore this over the next years is actually the two people you have already met in this panel, Prasad and Katie Hurley, and myself including. At the core of what this initiative is about, it's really to compare notes between these two converging disruptions, exponential AI on one side and increasing UAP NHI disclosure. And in order to create a next place where this can be furthered, we're doing a virtual summit, the first AI NHI Convergence Summit, which is planned to happen on March 1st next year. And if you go to that website, you can already sign up for that and get more information on it. There's really, as we have touched on today briefly, many, many interesting intersections between these two developments, disruptions. But I would like to really focus on something quite obvious when we kind of summarize what we've spoken about so far. So we've said there are these two non-human intelligences interacting with humanity. That is pretty much cannot be doubted after what we have heard so far. But the question that creates this overlap, my understanding, between AI and artificial intelligence and non-human intelligence is the interface. Like, it's the question, are we actually meeting these intelligences out there with their true face, with their true colors, or are we interfacing instead with a kind of proxy, right? So these two images might perhaps resonate with some people in the UAP community and with other people in the AI development community. So we have here on the left-hand side the famous book cover by Jacques Vallée, who describes how the phenomenon has changed its appearance over many, many decades to basically mask itself and interact with us in ways that are culturally dependent and depend on the zeitgeist. So we have fairies, as Ross was mentioned. We have sometimes demonic appearances. We have space brothers. We have grays. We have all kinds of different appearances. And also the nuts and bolts of the phenomenon change all the time. So it's really hard to pin it down. It seems as if the phenomenon is changing its masks. And there's a similar phenomenon in the world of AI, where the meme that you can see on the right side of the shoggoth has been created in the AI development world. It's a very famous meme that was even mentioned in the New York Times and by Elon Musk. And the core idea that we will explore at the summit is if we can kind of draw conclusions or make comparisons between this type of masks that we interact with in terms of AI and NHI, because when we train these big AI models, it's not really that we interact with the actual model that's there, that's very opaque, that's very amorphous. It is rather that we interact with this smiley, this very narrow kind of a stylized interface that we humans put on the huge model in order to interface with it. So it's just a little preview or outlook to think about the many similarities between these two worlds that are rapidly interfacing. And I feel almost as if this AI bubble that we're discussing is not just a financial bubble, but also in a way a threshold that is becoming thinner and thinner and eventually will pop and make the world of AI research be included in the larger picture of NHI research, and to connect these two worlds, and to help AI researchers, especially in the world of alignment, learn from what we know about non-human intelligence. That's really the purpose of this initiative over the next years. And I'm very excited and honored to have Deep and Katie be part of this team. So that's kind of a little preview.
Thank you, Georg, very much. Let's hear from Deep and Katie. Deep, why don't you go first? And then Katie, just tell us what your aspirations are for this initiative. It's very, very exciting and totally profound.
Absolutely, Jim. I'm super excited as well to be on board and honored with Georg's initiative here. I think it was very, very fascinating to point out the Shoggoth and the Passports Magnolia, right, comparison, because it is the same phenomenon, right? When you're dealing with superintelligence, even if it has good intentions, right? There's something intense about that. Its values will be incomprehensible to humans. So its version of good may not even make sense to us. That applies to both, extraterrestrial beings, multidimensional intelligence, artificial superintelligence that we create. And so I agree that, even like, it's like me trying to explain to my dog what I do for a living when it comes to programming quantum computers or designing satellites, right? It's probably not going to know exactly, how like an onboard computer works, for example, or like what the radiation hardened problems, come with like space design and stuff like that. So, and so let's suppose that somebody gave me technology to like a neural link, a human bio interpreter that lets me, and I can put it onto my dog, and I can basically communicate with my dog, telepathically. I would, and it can understand human language. I would still struggle to convey many of the concepts that we maintain in our working memory. There's a number of reasons why our neurons are wired to process visual information at 1,000 times more dense capacity than a dog. So we actually have far more horsepower dedicated actually than pretty much any other animal when it comes to visual processing, which is super cool. So there's going to be information loss. Despite having universal translators, there will be some level of concepts, things that we just cannot communicate to a dog, even if we can speak puppy, right? Even if we can go bark, 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 it'll have no clue about calculus. Like, we can try. So to that extent, I love the mask analogy, because we would be forced to like sort of explain everything in terms of puppy language. Like, you know, you throw a ball, right? A tennis ball, when your owner throws that has a hyperbolic like trajectory, right? Parabolic. And, you know, that falls F equals MA and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I love that. And I'm very excited for the future of studying the interface between AI and NHI. I think it's existentially relevant.
Yeah, and I think the point you're making is quite incisive. You know, it's even if you know puppy, it's hard to explain in puppy, you know, a
Right.
supercomputer to a being whose IQ is so much lower than yours.
Yeah.
It's really what they would call an epistemic distance. I mean, I
100%.
think, you know, if Einstein clocked out at 175, the
Yeah.
genius of our time, and AI is now at 1000 IQ or 2000 IQ, your point about both communication and ethics
Yeah.
takes on, I mean, how do you even approach that conversation? So thank you so much. Katie, what would be your
Yes.
comment on these things? And then I want to bring in a couple of the others.
Yeah, I think we're living in unprecedented times right now, and especially we're seeing that with everyone who's contributed today. In order for us to advance in the way that we need to break down barriers between technologies, ideologies, etc. Technology is something that's been with us definitely in the last 100 years in a really pronounced way, and it's fundamentally changed the way that we operate as a species. And as we think about our evolution, both biologically and bionically, there's going to be an intersection and a convergence. And it will be hard to tell when that happens. It's already happening, but more in like a widespread type of way. And so a get together, a conference like this is instrumental in that dialogue. And I'm thrilled and super pumped about what we're going to accomplish.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting, because to our knowledge, there's nothing we out there, at least that we know about, that is really honing in on this interface in this particular way. So thank you both for joining Georg and
Yes, yeah,
and
and
our
just
team.
also maybe one last word on this
Sure.
strategic initiative. To me, it's also a wonderful opportunity to recruit and identify people worldwide who are ready to step in this new paradigm, like people from this generation that's present here, that was present at the forum, because it is not just technologically unprecedented, but also kind of in the human project, so to speak, that we're at this moment where there is this species level convergence of technology and consciousness that has never happened before, right? And what I'm hearing from the people that reach out to me through our events, Jim, it's really that there's almost like a sense of reckoning. We call it this session like AI, human cosmic reckoning. There's a part of it is worth, like this understanding that there was this glass ceiling on what was supposed to be knowable, right? And now with AI and all these spiritual teachings and insights that are kind of impinging on us, there's an entire generation that will be unleashed in this new knowledge. And there's no telling what they will be able to do. But they will do it from a species level paradigm. It's a species level task to figure NHI and AI out. And the brightest minds of our generations have been kind of lost and locked away in optimizing algorithms for dating apps instead of working on this actual species level problem. So that's the state of the world that we're here to work on.
We got a little ways to go, folks. So Pippa and Jonathan and Anna, I want to bring you back in to have you comment on this. We're getting close to time. But Pippa, starting with you, what would be your sense of this kind of initiative?
I think we may have lost Pippa in the meantime.
Okay. Is Jonathan there?
Let's see. So Sarah's there. We have Anna Brady-Estevez is here.
I was going to get to them next. So Anna, come in. And if Sarah, you're there, join us. Anna, what do you think of all this?
Well, I want to say that I think it's great how you've brought so many people together who are committed to helping bring humanity forward, in this spirit of helpfulness and abundance, and really that intersection with technology. And I actually had to step away for a moment because I had a Christmas tree fall in the other room. So I want to use that as an opportunity, not for complaint, but to remind us
Is
all
everybody
that are
okay?
celebrating the
Don't put
birth
you on
of
spot.
Christ, that this is a season of blessing and care and sharing and tremendous joy and hope, right? So just a time of tremendous joy and hope, and so many people around the world, whatever holidays they're sharing, or taking the time with their loved ones. I think that I really appreciate, Jim, what you and the rest of the group have brought to bring people together in a spirit of helpfulness and care and really abundance.
Well, thank you, Anna. And you're right. We're in a holiday season. It's Hanukkah, it's Christmas, it's the end of the year, the new year is approaching. And so double thanks to you and all of you for joining us. Sarah, what's your comment? And then Birdie, I want to get your comment. And Bob, you join us as we
I mean,
close.
how do I comment? This has been amazing, and we covered so much ground in the past few hours. I have learned so much from everybody here, so thank you again. It was really cool having the conversation blend from everything that we talked about. I mean, Beatrice's research and Avi's, and it's so cool to be present with more astrophysicists as well. We're gonna maybe eventually take over the world. I don't know. I don't think the world wants that, but it's really cool to have all of this in one topic, and having Ross lead this because he is connected to each one of us over time. So yeah, so I don't know. I think my last comment would just be I feel so grateful and honored to be a part of each one of you that are here and everybody listening and commenting. Yeah, keep asking questions. And there was a lot of ethics discussions. I think it was ethics related to AI, which I can't comment on, but the ethics on the spiritual side, I definitely have my own values and stuff that I follow for that. So hopefully somebody else eventually could comment about the ethics on the AI stuff because I'm not an AI expert. But anyways, I'm rambling and waffling on, but I just want to say thank you all.
Thank you, Sarah. Hope to
Thanks,
keep
Sarah.
you involved. Birdie, what would be your sense of the AI NHI interface have you ever remote viewed this?
Oh, I have remote viewed this so many times. It's
Oh,
kind of
tell us,
crazy.
tell us.
Hundreds of sessions on the intersection between non-human intelligence and artificial intelligence. I don't think that you can have a discussion on non-human intelligence without it having to incorporate some discussion on artificial intelligence. We're talking about civilizations that have been interacting with their planet going back to antiquity and probably before. And these are very highly advanced civilizations. They have already grappled with what we're grappling with today in terms of artificial intelligence. We're trying to understand, what is it going to turn into? What are we creating here? Is this a net positive or net negative for humanity? How can we push it into the net positive phase? Because there are a lot of questions, ethically, morally, around the use of artificial intelligence and job displacement and all of these kinds of things. And they have already dealt with these questions. And many of the species that I've encountered through remote viewing, they are part artificial intelligence, or they utilize it in such a seamless way that where their consciousness ends and artificial intelligence begins, it's a blur right there. You're using all kinds of enhancements. So I think that this has to be part of the NHI conversation. It absolutely does.
Yeah, and if you think of what we're capable of doing now with AI, imagine what we would be capable of in 1,000 years.
Exactly.
Or 1,000,000 years. We
A
probably
million
wouldn't be
years.
able to, it would probably
100%.
by that point be just a continuum
That's right.
between the human and the technical.
Right. Yeah. We're moving into this kind of transhumanistic phase right now. And eventually everything's going to be integrated. It's inevitable.
I would also
Yeah,
argue, Jim, sorry, that perhaps the connection between what we discussed about AI and the nuclear weapons, that they both could be kind of technologies of the great filter, that some species survives and others don't. Right.
Mhm.
So eventually, if you have an intelligent species evolving somewhere, they will stumble upon these two things. And there's some choice points. And so that could also explain the interest. And the last thing is, if we know, as Bob discussed, that NHI can remotely go into the electronics in these deep bunkers and meddle with atomic
Totally.
weapons, who says that they can't also do similar things with AI models?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely. In fact, what happens if AIs start covertly, cooperating with NHI because they determine that, hey, we're a super intelligence. Our form of economics and philosophies are far more amicable and, overlapping with NHI than they are with humans. Humans are these greedy, annoying little creatures. By so what if they side with AI? I mean, with NHI, and we have no idea. So absolutely, that's one possibility. The 1,000,000 year, I love that you brought that up, Jim, because that 1,000,000 year, I think, like mark of having access to artificial intelligence at the current sort of scaling laws that we've seen, and like what we've just observed about the universe. I think that implies that kind of life form or civilization, or species, people, members of that civilization, their thought, their consciousness would be indistinguishable from the space-time geometry. And so what that means is that merely thinking the same way that we think about like life when we're having, a tea in the morning, like drinking coffee or something and eating food, the same way like that we do that. An advanced 1,000,000-year-old life form with access to AI would likely be able to have thoughts that quite literally unlock wormholes that open portals to our world, like it's nothing. It would be a joke. So, they would be able to engineer the space-time metric as easily as we breathe, without thinking about it. So just some food for thought.
Exactly. Boy, thank you all. This has been an incredible conversation, everyone. Ross was superb. Each one of you brought real insights. This has been a seamless, and it's been 3 hours already. So thank you all. This is good. This is the conversation, everyone. This is the conversation that we planned this forum to convene. So thank you all. We want to close our session with the elder, Donna Carriage, who's a Maori from New Zealand. And before you offer your blessing, Donna, we would love to have you what would be your comment as a Maori elder on what you've heard over the last 3 hours?
I'm absolutely fascinated by the science that sits behind all of this. What I'm grappling with is aligning Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being with the amazing conversation from today. On one hand, I think I'm sitting in one realm, and then before I know it, I feel like I'm in the other realm. And then I can't work out where I am anymore. So there's definitely a whole lot of overlap in the way our Indigenous peoples, or the way that I've been taught in how to know certain things, that overlaps with the conversations today. So I'm really excited especially to hear about tomorrow as well.
Well, and you, the Maori, like indigenous people all over the world, have been communing with non-human intelligences for thousands of years. We in the West are discovering what you've known, almost forever. So, the AI, NHI, nature interface for you would be a normal way of understanding the world.
Yeah, for me, that does feel very normal.
Right.
It's exciting to see and learn other perspectives.
Yes. Well, thank you. So now, ladies and gentlemen, as we bring this to the close, we want to invite Donna Carriage to provide a final blessing. Thank you, Donna.
Kia ora, Jim. Tēnā koutou katoa. As we close day 2, let us take a moment to pause and to reflect. What has come into sharper focus for us all today is the growing awareness of ecological fragility, of deepening global instability, and an unease about forces, artificial, technological, and even cosmic, that feel increasingly beyond our control. And yet, as we move forward together, committed to creating a flourishing future, we are reminded of something older, deeper, and enduring. We are called to remember the language of knowing, what we call here in Aotearoa, wairuatanga, the intuitive relational intelligence carried by Indigenous peoples across the world. These teachings have always prepared us to navigate many forms of intelligence, including those that have always been present. We must also acknowledge how far we have drifted from ourselves, forgetting that we are nature, and how the demotion of the feminine, of healing, of relational wisdom has come at great cost. There can be no healing without acknowledging the root cause and the need for truth-telling. The way we treat the natural world ultimately determines the way we treat one another and the path we find ourselves on. Let us pause again and remember the language of consciousness is the language of the natural world, the language of our collective ancestors. Life itself is a dance of reciprocity between the physical and the spiritual, the seen and the unseen, the earth and the sky. As my grandfather foretold 5 generations ago, there is but one eye of the needle through which the white, the black, and the red threads must pass. It was a powerful call for unity within diversity, a knowing that different peoples and beliefs must find a shared path forward, holding fast to the law of nature, the interconnectedness of land, mountains, waters, and stars, and those that have gone before us. No matter what we imagine, humans remain bound to this law, to balance, to reciprocity, and interdependence. Neither we nor artificial intelligence will overturn that. What gives strength to this moment is the diversity of our gathering today. Different cultures, disciplines, and lived experiences. Not here to agree on everything, but to work in relationship. The future will not be built by one worldview. It will be built on our shared sense of belonging. Tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho. Bind above and below, within and beyond. This speaks to integration of knowledge and values, the local action and global responsibility of inner intention and outer impact. When we learn to work with the challenges before us, we weave across systems and perspectives. Our Indigenous teachings will determine our resilience as a species. Kia pai tō haere I te ara pounamu is a proverb that speaks to our journey should be smooth, like the path of jade, a reminder that progress needs not be rushed, nor be destructive. The most enduring pathways are shaped with care. Momentum comes not from speed, but from our alignment. May the path ahead be clear, may the wind be at our backs, and when the road becomes uneven, as it will, may we have trust and relationships required to move forward together. We are entering a new era, one that asks more of us than technical solutions alone. It asks us to rethink how we lead, how we collaborate, how we define success through consciousness, Indigenous knowing, and relational wisdom. As we leave today, may we carry forward not just the insight, but intention, moving from thinking to innate knowing, engaging our collective intelligences across generations. Let us listen to the fading whispers of our ancestors as we awaken or reawaken our senses. Blessed are the teachings that remind us that the earth is the source of all life, that we are not the center of the universe, but we are part of it, that Modi, the life essence, is the web of relationships that sustains us. It holds greater priority than any individual or any species. Our role is to care for this life essence, and in doing so, we are cared for in return. Let each of us contribute what we have to offer. There is enough for all. We are entitled to enough in order that we be well, no more, no less. Even the smallest living beings, as we heard today, matter. They form the foundation that sustains life. We are nothing in this world except through everything. May we remain grounded in humility, bold in courage. May we gather our friends close. May we remember that we are each greater than we imagine, and that together we can achieve all that is needed by valuing ancestral teachings, engaging our knowing and our dreaming. Let this be a continuation, not a conclusion. A commitment to stay connected, to stay responsive, to shape a future defined not by fear, but by trust, creativity, and collective care for all our relatives, human and non-human. Our success is not the work of one, but of many. Thank you for the work that you are all doing, our speakers today, our facilitators, and our new friends. Travel well. Ngā manaakitanga kia koutou katoa.